Hello, everyone. Welcome to our final show, just of August. It's hot. It's Tuesday night. Hope everyone's doing well. This is Zach from GBC. We've got Kevin English here from Dirty Freehub that we're going to bring on in a second. A few notes before as people start to file into this feed. First of all, thanks to Dave from Gravelstoke for joining me, as well as Danny and Jace from Thank Gravel It's Friday. If you check us on Instagram, got a little fun ride up into the Angels National Forest. Dave on Instagram has already thrown in, and Jace from Thank Gravel It's Friday have already thrown some pictures up, which are pretty cool. Also of note, if you didn't see the announcement last week, GBC is pairing with Thank Gravel It's Friday over at Mammoth Tough. We will be doing the shakeout ride on the Friday that starts at 11 a.m. There may be a pre-ride in there that you'll hear about, but we will get to that soon. So anyways, time to bring on Kevin. And hello, Kevin. How you doing?
Doing great. How you doing, Zach?
I'm glistening. I think you could tell by the sweat kind of reflecting off of here that I hope I don't turn into that. Remember that one part in Airplane where he's like sweating is all buckets and stuff like that? Yeah, I hope not to recreate that live.
Well, I think we both had big rides today. Yours was steeper than mine, but mine was a little bit longer, I think.
Where'd you go?
We did kind of a circumnavigation around the McKenzie River. So about 50 miles and 5,500 feet of gain with about half of that unpaved. So it was a great day.
And what are the temperatures right up there in Bend right now?
I was riding in 65 degrees today and cool and shady. It was pretty, it was nice. It was not hot. You?
When I got back in the car, it said it was 89 degrees. So it was one of those things like we started off. We could tell it was kind of hot, and as we were going up the elevation, we were hoping it would start to cool down, but really, we were descending. It really felt like we were at a human hairdryer.
Wow.
Yeah. But yeah. So I know we've had you on GBC Live before on our other format, and what you guys have done with your routes and webpage and continue to develop everything. It's just as a great resource for routes and just like an awesome footprint on what people should be having for information. It's so clear. How it's divided and really hits the notes of how routes should be laid out to people, because same thing with me. I would not be out there unless I found other routes, and have a lot of information to go over. But I mean, the work that you've done over there, Linda, is real extensive.
We're very proud of it. But Zach, you do a great job. And actually, the guy I was riding with today had done several of the routes that you have documented, and he loved them. So I think both organizations are doing some stuff that's really, really cool. And it's really, I think it's a positive for the cycling community. And so thank you for your work.
Oh, well, I mean, I think that the more information we have out there, the better. It's not a competition. It's just, everyone inspires each other, and we all if we all told the same story the same way, we wouldn't feel confident the story's being told properly. Yeah. So I definitely think like other people's viewpoints are super important to building trust over, being able to go out into a place that you're unfamiliar with.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that's really, really cool is, there's a handful of organizations that are doing some really well curated routes. And I think each of us takes a different approach, but what we're doing is we're lifting the quality of what each of us does. Because all of a sudden I look at something you do and I go, oh shit, that's pretty damn cool what he just did, and here's how we can do something similar. And, and when we keep doing that all around, I think it becomes more powerful, and the quality that we're all putting out is much, much better.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, it was funny, like when we were up there today, I was thinking of, when I used first to come up here, we didn't have Strava.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no idea, because when I was going up into Mount Wilson Toll Road, I actually ran it. And today I just was like, oh my Lord, this was 10 miles up, 10 miles back over some pretty strenuous stuff, and I would actually run it.
Yep.
So I think I think that's one of the things, like, because the tools always change. Like we
Yep.
see Ride with GPS makes changes, even Strava has made some changes. So, we always interpret the information that's in front of us, and that's always changing. So,
Yep.
I think it's very, very exciting to it gets you to want to always keep checking, and that's super important, because probably unlike if we were making road routes, gravel routes aren't static.
Mhm.
We have trees fall down, we have landslides, weather conditions, so it's really important to have these other tools that kind of make us stay on top of everything.
Yeah, no, that is really cool. I mean, one of the sections we've got is a comments block, and we recently had an issue with dogs on a route, and I ended up calling up the sheriff and talking to the sheriff, and the sheriff said, "Hey, do you realize that those dogs are actually livestock guardian dogs?" I said, "I don't even know what that is. What is that?" And he goes, "A livestock guardian dog is a dog or a set of dogs, usually 2 to 6, that are there to protect a herd of sheep or a herd of cattle from predators like wolves, packs of coyotes, and cougars." And I proceeded to get educated by the sheriff in a very polite way that those dogs have special privileges. And there's a way to ride around livestock guardian dogs. And the way not to ride around them is actually to try to outsprint them. Because when you try to outsprint them, they are taking that as you're trying to make an end around to get to the herd. And so they're viewing that as an aggressive posture, where instead what you need to do is you actually need to slow down, stop, and the dogs will actually stop, and then you need to walk through. And I was like, I had never heard of that in my life.
Wow.
And so, that's now information we can disseminate to people in terms of instead of getting the bejesus scared out of you when you go buy these dogs, here's what you need to do.
Wow. Yeah, that's important information. Let me quickly pull up the webpage, dirtyfreehub.com, so people have like an idea. And this is the opening page. But already, like, for people unfamiliar, there's tons of tabs and information to get off the top. But even just sliding down, I think this is basically like an easy breakdown. What people are looking for are routes by region, and definitely I'm happy with anything with mountains on the west, and this pretty much covers all the area. But even furthermore, then you go into the map, and you're able to obviously geolocate where the routes are. And yeah, I've done this in the past when I did the route up the coast, the Prairie Creek. And yeah, it was interesting because there were the choice of routes in the area, but you gave a real extensive breakdown of the route, and that was super helpful, because I might not have gone on the right time of the year, and I was not lucky in terms of the weather.
Yep.
Which, if you're a gravel cyclist, you have to accept.
Yeah.
But without the information, I probably would have been a lot more lost. I would have maybe turned around and maybe not gotten back.
Yeah. And a note on Prairie Creek is, since you've ridden it, it has gotten a bit more overgrown, and the Park Service is having difficulty maintaining that trail. So just kind of a shout out, if there's any volunteers that would like to coordinate with us or you to help debrush and clear that trail, we'd love to hear from you.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I remember having to fight through the flat part there and then cross a creek, or it wasn't, I don't know if it was a creek. I just knew between the plants there was water underneath me.
Yeah. Well, I also remember you had an episode with the Roosevelt elk out there.
Yes. I was not expecting so many, and I just quietly tiptoed, and it seemed like that was good enough. Maybe if there was just like 2 or 3 of them, maybe I could have taken them on, but I guess it was just too many. So
yeah, that's a pretty cool breed of elk. It's actually the largest North American elk that there is, and it's a non-migrating elk. They actually stay in their territory the entire year.
Huh? Is that because of the region or just the?
I do not have the answer to that. I would actually need to bring in a wildlife biologist to get the reason behind that. I just know that they do not migrate like a lot of other, like the deer or the pronghorn or other elk. They're kind of homebound.
Well, let me just, when you go into a route, basically you get, first a bunch of photos up here, and then what's really great, and people ask me all the time, and I just never seem to bring it up, but like, what is a recommended tire size? And that's just a real simple thing to do. And some of the information here is straightforward, which locale, rural, which might is like a front door for what people are looking for sometimes, to a lot of the other route information you have in there as well. And I should have had another slide here, but but then underneath you go into detailed notes over these rides, and sorry, let me pull this one up. But just so much information that's in there, and here we go.
Yeah, we really try to connect you to where you're riding, to talk about the culture, the history, the heritage. And a way to think about, or how we kind of think about it, is kind of discovery by bike. Of you're going out on a discovery ride to discover something about the environment or the culture or the history or heritage of where you're riding. And so we do that through points of interest. And I think in this one, and then we have, we talk about the terrain and the riding conditions in one of the tabs also. But and we're getting better over time, and we keep refining our approach, and adding pictures and refining our technique. So that's where we try to go, because we really want you to connect to where you're riding. And that way, hopefully you'll appreciate where you're riding, and you'll look at it in a positive way and go, you know what, I really also want to keep this available for my kids. And here's some of the things I can do right now, such that my kids have the same experience that I have.
Yeah. It's interesting, because I think we all do this every once in a while. Like, we kind of have like a, maybe you would say, purpose or mantra for each ride. But some rides, maybe you're just really trying to, I got to be back by a certain time, or I just really want to go really hard. To others where you do more as touring and then notice the things along the way. And I really think that, when you have like all these little notes of the towns in the area, definitely makes you want to stop and look a little bit closer. And to me personally, I think what's interesting is about gravel is that, these aren't random points put up on a map. Like, roads connected everything and are part of the reason for on the back end of the growth of these things as well. So it's just interesting that your website is put up that there's layers of information, and you don't have to. It's really easy to sort through getting into as much information as you need.
Yeah.
But it and like, how many total routes do you have on the webpage?
So right now, I think we have about 300 developed out ride guides.
Uh-huh.
The other part that's that I find interesting is we have a project management tool that we manage all our routes in, or ride guides in. We have about 150 other rides in some development stage of partially ridden or ridden with photography and videography, or completely ridden and have all the ride notes, the videography, the photography, just haven't had the resources yet to publish them. So we've got 300 that are out there published, and about another 150 that are sitting in this basket that could be published. And right now, our goal is roughly, if our minimum goal per year is if we can publish 20, that's great. If we can publish 50, that's super, super awesome.
Wow.
So that's kind of, we're in that bucket of somewhere. It depends on what other projects we have going on. So,
yeah, I don't think people realize how it looks like. Okay, I just put this together and ride with GPS. It definitely, for us people that are putting together routes, heck, people that put together routes for.
Well, let me ask you the question. So you do videos that are longer format videos of somewhere between 8 maybe to 15 minutes. I know it takes you a while to do those. How long does it take you to do those?
I mean, it can take at least a week for the most part, maybe longer. Probably a week and a half sometimes
How many hours? How many hours are you putting into a video, you think?
Okay.
I've got to guess, but I'd like your audience to have an idea of what you're putting in.
I want to say probably about 30 hours of video, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And that's it's tremendous work you do. And the videos are fantastic because you've got to develop the content, you got to write the content, you got to shoot the content, and then you got to reshoot the content. So, because sometimes you talk, right?
Yeah.
You're recording over, and it's like, oh, that didn't come out so good. Or you stumbled over the words and you have to re-record it, put it back in.
Well, and then there's this part too, which I'm sure you do before you do your route guides. You actually plan out where you're going and you look at it. And before I do a video, I put my route on Google Earth and then fly around and just try and see what's around, what's nearby, what am I going to miss. And I'll never get it all. But that has always played into whenever, for the most part, my videos, I just want to have a feeling and sense of what's around.
Yeah. So I really do appreciate the work you do, because those long format videos are tough. They're super tough.
Yeah, I do have a plan, but it requires winning the lottery. And but like, I even think of like, what if something like that ever happened? Like, I would still have to do a lot of work on my own before I could hand it off to somebody to put it together. Because even my dad is an editor, and I don't want him doing this. Like, it's too hard of work to put on this plate, even though he's retired. So
yeah, and I think unless you ride the route, it's really super hard to put together.
Yeah,
to put the video together, because you just don't have the context of how to do it.
Yeah, and I know it's interesting because I know there are guides out there that have like hundreds, thousands of routes on there, but they may not have been ridden. Somebody might have plugged in, gone to Strava and looked at the route and said, "Oh, well, this is the toughest climb," and may not have had a chance to actually ride it, because really it's so endless that yeah, it's really hard to come across it all.
Yeah, it is.
So we need more feet in the ground.
I think you and I keep thinking about how do we get more feet on the ground. And I keep reinventing my ideas on this, and we're going to try a new idea in the fall. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's really tough watching the movie Minions. I'm like, I want a few of those to get work done. So I want to bring up, I guess, like your latest project, which is
Yes.
these gravel guides, and
Yes.
tell people what these are.
Okay, so this is our first independently published gravel guide, and this is a gravel guide of 10 routes on the Oregon coast, and it's a printed guide. And if I go back 3 or 4 years ago, I swore we would never do anything in print. And we ended up in a project as one of 3 participants on a different gravel guide, and it was tremendously successful and people loved it. And then so we took our step into just doing a solo gravel guide on our own. And so we have 10 routes on the Oregon coast, and we took a kind of a different approach. We wanted to still connect people with where they're riding. So a big part of this book is about connection. And so we worked with a local artist. We feature 4 original prints of that artist in this book, and he is paid for the usage of those prints. And then we took, the artist is also paid a commission off the sale of each book for allowing us to use his style against our photography that we've taken. So the entire book looks like an art piece in the style of the artist. The other thing we did is we tell stories throughout the book, meaning that a lot of the Oregon coast is riding in timberlands. And so we've got a story page that talks about the struggles of some of these towns have gone through over time, and how it was a complex issue of how timber became a less sustainable business over time and how it affected those towns. We also talk about timberlands riding etiquette. When you're riding on the coast, what do you look for? What are the telltale signs that logging is occurring, and I may need to be highly aware of log trucks that day? And there's some very interesting signs of that. We've got a couple stories about Indigenous people in the book, about the Chetco people down south near Brookings, and we talk about the Amanda story up near Yahuts. And then the last part we talk about is we really want cyclists, when they go to these smaller communities, to spend money where they ride and to spend with local businesses, because that has such a tremendous impact. In the guide, we've got 10 routes. They all have QR codes to the full digital guide. So there's a brief introduction. There's the map section that's there. And then it's a guide that you can actually tuck in your pocket, take on the ride, because it does have some, not all, of the points of interest along that ride with the mile markers. So this is our first project. The book is in print. I don't have my copies yet, but we think we'll be at full distribution starting about September 15th. It is for sale on the website at this point. And then we have another guide coming out mid-April of next year that is for Oregon on what we call all access routes, those that are shorter, easier distances, less technical, less remote. It's for the adaptive athlete. It's for the person who got busy with life and gained 20 pounds and wants to get back into cycling. It's for families. It's for the person who's got older and just doesn't have the aerobic capacity. Maybe he's on an e-bike. So that's our second project that's coming along with a gravel guide in April of next year.
Wow. Wow. A lot to break down there. Yeah, I guess like one thing that we forget about is the etiquette of riding in the areas and what to expect. And maybe I've talked to you before about my experiences at the the family cabin on my wife's side there in Oregon,
Uh-huh.
and going on the timber roads and running into I don't even know what type of animals they were. Is it, emus or no.
And emu's like a big ostrich.
Yeah, it was. There was some really unusual animal with antlers that wasn't elk,
Okay.
wasn't a deer. It looked like some type of hybrid that I came across.
Was it a pronghorn? A smaller than a deer, but size of a deer?
Uh, I have to go see if I can find the video of it.
Was it Eastern or Western Oregon?
It was near Elkton, Sutherland, off of the Umpqua River.
That's not pronghorn.
I'm trying to figure out what it was. I'll have a video ready up for next time because that was quite an adventure.
Yeah.
And like I remember, like I was going the year before on this logging road, and I had gone over a couple down trees, and I saw somebody driving up there. I was like, "Oh, good, there's somebody." I was like, "Hey, guys, just to let you know, there's a couple down trees. I don't know if you can go around, if you can go that way." And they go back. It's like, "Oh yeah, just want to let you know, right behind us there was a bear, so you may want to." I was like, "Oh, great."
So, it's really interesting. So, I just saw a bear cub probably 2 weeks ago. I've never had an issue with wildlife in terms of them being aggressive to me.
Mm-hmm.
What I've found is typically if I can help reduce the anxiety level of the animal, it will de-escalate. And usually what that means is stopping and putting a foot down.
Mm-hmm.
Typically when I've run across a bear, it's running, I'm riding. If I continue to ride, it continues to run. The anxiety level's high. Every time that I've stopped, that bear will probably continue for another 100 yards, run, and then stop, look at me, maybe 5 minutes, and then typically wander off. And then I'll wait probably another 5-10 minutes and then ride through. And that's exactly what happened with this bear cub. This bear cub, it didn't want anything to do with me at all. And we just stopped. Didn't know which side of the road mom was on. We stopped. We waited about 10 minutes and had no issue. And I've had this happen with cougars. I've had it happen with wolves. I've had it happen with bears. Every time, I've never had an issue. I think the only time it would be is if I came around a corner and really surprised something, then it could be an issue. But otherwise, it's always been stop, and usually they'll check you out. And they usually walk off, and it's not a big deal.
Maybe I just need to have like loudspeakers or something like that.
You know what really, some of the wheel sets when you pedal and you freewheel, they spin to make a lot of noise.
Like
That'll usually notify an animal that you are in the area. It's usually when you're going uphill and you're going 4 miles an hour that you'll come across something because they're not hearing you, and you're probably so out of breath that you're not holding a conversation with your riding partner at that point. So you're probably pretty quiet.
So I have like one of the pages up.
Yep.
And you hear the north routes.
Yep.
And I've actually never gone north of Reedsport along the coast.
Okay.
So
I can walk you through a little bit of these routes if you want me.
Yes.
Okay. So Terrible Tilly, that is named for a lighthouse. The Tillamook Lighthouse that is off the coast there was known for many famous shipwrecks out there. And that's a route that actually goes into private timberlands. And we talk about some of the issues when you do ride private timberlands. Cheddarhead is like the big signature route. It is nearly 100 miles and nearly 10,000 feet of gain, with about 20 miles on a really sweet riding section of single track. And you're heading towards the coast on that single track, and you think, oh, it's going to be downhill. It's 4,000 feet of loss and 4,000 feet of gain in that 20 miles on the single track. Absolutely gorgeous. And you can break this route up into a bikepacking route or a credit card tour, and it goes through also the Tillamook State Forest And so we talk about a lot of the logging practices. Cape Meares starts at a lighthouse, and it goes along the Bay Ocean Spit, which was a area that was developed out into a high-end recreational town in the early 1900s that washed away into the sea as they put in jetties, and they changed the currents of the nearby ocean.
Did they used to have like a gambling there?
Yes, they used to have gambling. They used to have it was meant to be the Atlantic City of the West Coast.
Okay.
Okay.
I just saw a piece on it just for people. If Henry's watching, there's a YouTube channel called Sidetrack Adventures. He's based in San Diego, but he does a lot of stuff along the West Coast. And yeah, I just was looking that up on a map. Oh, wow. All right.
So it's a super fun route, and it's a super flat route, and you get and it's one of the shortest ones. I think it's maybe 15 miles total out and back. Drift Creek Falls goes to a falls that you hike out to. It's about a mile hike near the midpoint of the trail, but you go over this super cool suspension bridge that's probably, I don't know, several hundred feet off the ground, and you step on it, and every step you make, it bounces the bridge, and then you go walk down to the bottom of the falls, and you come back out. And Land of the Yahuts is out of Yahuts, Oregon, where we tell the story of the Amanda Trail, which tells about the indigenous people and them being moved off their lands and into reservations, and being marched along the coast. And that brings you up into some of the timberlands in that area that are super, super cool. And you run into these pockets of one-lane gravel roads that exist out there. It goes between, or not one lane, you run into these pockets of one-lane paved roads that are way out in the forest. So you go between these gravel roads and these paved roads, and it's super cool. And you're on this really traditional Coast Range forest with big Doug fir trees, red alders, big leaf maples, sword ferns, wild blueberries, and creeks rushing through. It's pretty cool.
Wow. Yeah, whenever we drive down the coast, like, and it's kind of like the same feeling when I go from the Central Coast to the North Coast, to the Lost Coast. It's like the geography is similar but slightly different. It's very relatable to each other, and I love riding the coast. And I think this is Ground by California, but to me, I don't know why that line was put there. It doesn't change anything once you cross over, other than no sales tax.
Yeah.
But I've just always been interested in just kind of like the extension of the Pacific Coast, and being able to ride. I know tons of people that it's their dream to ride from border to border along the coast, and this context is part of the reason why.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's interesting about the coast also is I before I started on this project, I thought the Oregon or the Coast Range was all the same type of trees and terrain. And on the southern coast, there's a place, we've got a route called Wild Horse 8 that goes up to this Hunter Creek area of critical concern. And it doesn't even look like anything you would expect on the Oregon or the Coast Range forest. It's madrone trees, it's tan oak trees, it's scattered and thin, and you're looking at it and going, this is so different. It's got these a plant called a cobra lily, which basically eats insects, and it's a really different environment. It's like I'd never expected that. I just thought the Coast Range was the Coast Range, and there's these pockets that are so different. Or if you go a little bit further south to Florence, they've got this whole set of sand dunes that is from the Ice Age, that these sand dunes are now in place. And it's like, where did sand dunes come from? It's just super cool.
Yeah, I think we actually used one of those sand dunes for our holiday card a couple of years ago. It was so gorgeous being out there and no one was around, and it wasn't windy, most important.
I'll actually tell. Have you ever heard the story, the World War II story about Brookings and the attack by the Japanese on the mainland U.S.?
This wasn't with the balloons, is it?
You're close.
Okay.
There was, I believe, 2 attacks on U.S. mainland by the Japanese during World War II. And this is where they had a submarine that carried a disassembled float plane. The submarine surfaced off the coast of Oregon. They assembled the float plane. They loaded it with incendiary bombs. And the intent was to fly over the Oregon coast, launch those bombs, start the forest on fire to divert resources away from the war effort. And near Brookings, there's a spot that they actually drop these bombs, and we have a route that goes out to the beginning of the trailhead. And then it's about a mile walk on this really cool trail that has a bunch of kiosks along the way that tells this story.
Wow. Geez, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, like to be able to go through on a bike and look at it at a human level rather than drive by and then am I going to find a parking spot?
Well, this one, there's hardly any people on this one. I mean, driving out to it is about 25 miles on a tough dirt road or gravel road. And so you get out there and there's nobody, and it's just gorgeous and beautiful and big trees, and you're learning about the history of World War II. So we had a great time.
Oh, wow. I mean, people think that we just like, hey, I find these things, it's pretty easy. Like, how do you plan doing all these routes? Because you obviously, when I know you already talked about the 300, but like I said, it takes a lot of work, especially when you do the travel and aren't familiar. And we've already talked about your use of the Garmin InReach, but still goes beyond that.
I kind of give you the example of how it works. So we probably, as you, had forest fires came really early this year. And where I live in Bend, Oregon, Central Oregon, we ended up with smoke day after day after day. And finally we said we had enough. And so we decided to go over to Coos Bay, which is on the Oregon coast. And we found an RV spot. And we were out there for about 4 weeks, one spot. And what happens is you find a ride. And it's like, oh, that's a pretty good ride. And as you're doing that ride, all of a sudden you see this other gravel road and you go, I wonder where that goes. So then you come back, you sit in front of the computer and you start looking at that gravel road on Ride with GPS or Strava and Google Maps. And all of a sudden you say, oh, there's this cool thing out here called Pyramid Rock. I wonder what Pyramid Rock is. And so now you start routing the route up this cool gravel road over to Pyramid Rock. And you get something mapped out and you fly over it with Google Earth and you look at it a bunch of times and you pull up the private property overlays and you make sure you're okay. And then you start going and riding it. And if you're lucky, the first time you ride it, it's really, really good. Usually what happens is the first time you ride it, it goes, it's really, really good until it really wasn't. And then you come back home and you go, okay, this section really wasn't that good. Now, how do I go around that section that's not really, really good? And you pull something up and it's like, oh, look, there's this really cool river over here. And it looks like it's got a valley in it. I can follow that river and then I can go over here. So then you go back out and you ride that part. And as you're riding that part, all of a sudden you find this other cool gravel road and you're like, I wonder where that goes. And so it's kind of this spider web concept that when you hang out in an area, it starts getting pretty good. I'll tell you the other thing that happens with me. Again, the Oregon coast is known for logging. And we'll come across log trucks. I will wave down the log truck every time. And I'll talk to the log truck drivers. I'll say, hey, one, I want to know where the logging is going on, so I'm not going towards it. And two, I'll ask them, where should I go? What's cool? What do I need to know about? And they typically come up with some great ideas. Or like in Coos Bay, I'll wander into the historical museum and talk to the curator, and the curator will go, did you know this? Did you know that? Did you know this? And I'm like, no. Where is that? And they'll point it out on a map, and lo and behold, it's usually down some really small road. And it's like, oh, okay, maybe I can work a route into that now. And it's a matter of talking with people, spending time in front of the maps, just being out there. Is kind of how it goes. Every once in a while, you run into a rider, and you'll stop the rider and go, hey, where'd you go? And they'll say, oh, I went here. And it's like, how was it? And it's like, oh, it's great. And here's what you're going to see. And it's like, oh, that's pretty cool. So, and then the more you understand an area, the more you understand what some of those features or highlights or remarkable spots are. And then the trick is, how do I connect them? And how do I get a route that's really quality most of the time? And for me, I typically try to look for some kind of transition about every 10 miles, because I typically kind of get bored. And so I'm looking for an anchor point or a transition from, hey, the gravel goes from really smooth, and after 10 miles, it transitions to a little bit of a rugged, steep downhill, maybe drops into some single paved logging road, stuff like that. It's a matter of time on the ground and talking to people and connecting with that community.
Now I want to backtrack a little, because people saw me not going off for a little bit. Like, once you brought up the stuff off of Brookings, I had to look it up and pull it up so people had an idea of this. And this is what you were talking about. And there's even, I guess, a lot more history here on the right as well, which is pretty fascinating. And the route there is extensive, and Brookings is just on the southern border there along the coast, and just so much information that, I mean, this is what draws me to rides, is having all this context broken down. And the Wheeler Ridge Japanese aerial bombing site is a location of the first bombardment by enemy aircraft in the United States. Just really, I mean, this is the information that really grips you.
Yeah. And, and we try to give you links out to more fuller information. And we know that on the web, we all consume information in small little tidbits. So as you were there, we typically have a picture, and we try to keep the text about the size, the height of the picture, give you a taste of what we know, and then provide links out to a much more fuller description that's been done. And so there's a question on the right that I can answer. The guidebooks are currently on the store on the website. They will start shipping. So the books we have out there right now are the ones that will be signed by the artist and are stamped with the collector's edition stamp, meaning they are their first print, first edition. And so it's signed by the artist. We are hoping to start shipping those out on September 15th. The artist, Spencer, just got his shipment of books today, so he's starting to sign away. That's where they're at.
Oh, well, someone's got to crack the whip. I also want to highlight, thank you, Seth Alla, for the kind note here. And for I hope you get to go check this out, and definitely maybe I should just quickly ask this question here quickly. What would be the best time of the year to do the coast?
That's a great question. I'll tell you what. So we worked with the Oregon Coast Visitors Association, and initially they were like, we really want to attract people on the shoulder seasons, the spring and the fall. And then we started working with them more, and like, hold it, you're putting people into more remote spots. So they're like, we're okay with summer also. So let me kind of back up. So in the spring, there are pockets of really good weather on the coast. We started riding some of these routes in April. And so we would weather watch and go, oh, okay, there's a 3-day window coming up with some really good weather. And we were able to ride some of the stuff in March, April, and May. I think Double Go is one of the rides we did. I think was as early as March. And so springtime has got pockets of windows of weather that are really good. Summer, when we were there in August, every day was good. So summers, I would say, is incredibly good. Fall will again start picking up in terms of you're going to start looking for weather windows again. Some of the routes do go higher, like Wild Horse 8 is up to about 4,000 feet, so you can get into snow conditions. Some of the other routes, like Double Go, the max elevation of Double Go, I think, is 850 feet. So if you find a nice day in the winter that's 55 and sunny, you can actually ride Double Go. So a really general answer is, if you really look at the weather from fall, winter, spring, you probably can pick up a riding day or a couple days there. Summer is going to be basically almost any day in summer, June, July, August, and part of September is going to, I mean, it's really great weather at that point. So you really don't miss a whole lot. It's very hard to, you're typically going to get some really good weather during that period of time.
Oh, okay. Good to know.
The one thing I will say, coast is those routes ride a lot cooler, meaning that if you're on the coast and it's 70 degrees on the coast, like in Florence or Reedsport or Brookings, that's a pretty warm day for them. And as you move inland, the temperatures will go up a little bit, but as you go up in elevation, the temperatures come back down. In all the riding we did in putting this book together, I never felt overly hot. And I would know I always carried at least a windbreaker with me.
Interesting. Yeah, when I was route scouting for the Grasshopper series, you saw Hopper, which is a little bit behind the Lost Coast. And we did that end of July. And definitely once you get inland, it can be a little bit muggier, but this is further south. And, I think it's a good question for people getting into the area.
Yeah. And in the guidebook, we actually do link out to a podcast we did with one of the local meteorologists from the TV news stations. That's called Weather Watching on the Coast. And he talks through some of the things to look for and how to pay attention to weather and know when to ride too.
Yeah, everyone on Patreon, please support GBC so we can have our own meteorologist chime in here. We'd like to have the same resources as well for everyone. Let me go back to the guidebook.
Yep.
And I believe you were talking about this a little bit earlier too, off of Tillamook, the lighthouse and the area up here.
Yep, that's the Cape Meares Lighthouse. And that is actually a photograph that I took of the lighthouse that is then styled in Spencer's style of art.
And so, like with each book, with each route, this is basically, I mean, I know this is just a few miles in, but all the information and notes that you see along the way.
Yep.
Wow, what a coincidence.
And like on the right-hand side, that middle block talks about that town site. The Atlantic City of the West is in that first line there of the video that you recently saw. And I'm trying to read this actually. It had a dance hall, a hotel, an orchestra, a 1,000-seat movie theater, a shooting range, a bowling alley, tennis courts, a railroad system, a natatorium with wave generators. So, yeah.
About how, what are the size of these books?
So the book, you're asking a great question. It's 80 pages, and it's 80 pages. It'll fit in your middle bike jersey pocket on your backside. It's 6 inches tall, 4¼ inches wide.
Okay, yeah, because like maybe some people remember Thomas guides or having to unfold the big map. So
No, it's not that big. It's
yeah.
If anybody's familiar with an A6 envelope, it fits into an A6 envelope. And that was a conscious decision to make sure it fit into a jersey pocket. It was also a conscious decision to make sure it fit into an A6 envelope for shipping costs, to keep all that in control.
Wow. Well, so is your is your project to keep at this point to keep developing more of these guidebooks, or do you have other projects that you're going in the direction? Or
So what we found, I think if you probably go back 10, 15 years ago, I think we all thought print was dead. And I don't think print is dead. Print is a medium that's tactile. It can be sexy. We like to look at it. So we have the next guidebook series, like I said, is the All Access coming out. We're pitching 3 other guidebooks right now to other spots in Oregon. We're also working on another project, which is called Riding Gravel, which is a trifold brochure that sets up an itinerary for 3 days of riding in a certain place. So if you're familiar with like the New York Times, it does 36 hours in Barcelona, right? So this trifold brochure basically sets up a Friday, Saturday, Sunday itinerary for you. And so Friday you arrive in the afternoon, and here's that shorter ride that you can get done. Here's a couple places that you would consider to stay. Maybe one's an RV park, another's a campground, another a couple cool hotels in the area. And then here's a couple recommendations on restaurants to go to. And then Saturday, you've got that big signature ride that's going to be longer, take more hours. And then again, restaurant recommendations or coffee shop or breakfast shop. And then Sunday, you're going to have that shorter ride again, such that you can get that ride in the morning and then drive back to wherever you live. And then we try to tie into that guide a little bit of the history of the area, and also tie into when they kind of have some cool things going on in that town. So like our first one was done in Baker City. Baker City in the fall does the Taste of Baker, which is an event that all the restaurants come out in the street and have show off some of their best dishes. And then I think Baker does a First Friday art walk throughout the summer. And then they also have a significant art show. So we showcase those things. And that's another project we're starting to work on with towns. And what we're finding is both these projects help build momentum for areas. When we just did digital, it was pretty hard to build marketing momentum. And these 2 projects allow us to build marketing momentum and actually have a bigger impact with communities.
Wow. Yeah, I'm glad you're going this route. I think that one of the things when I'm going places where maybe I'm a little bit off the grid is you worry about cell service, connection. And it's always good to know that you've got something printed in your hand that will always be there is a resource. It's super, super important because I do this on rides. Like I'm constantly like, cell service is out. I hope I know where I'm going and everything is downloaded. But the book really takes away a lot of that uncertainty.
Another way to approach this, which is really interesting, and I know this works both on Android and the iPhone, is you are able to download your GPX file for a route to a folder called a files folder, which means now the route is locally residing on your phone. And if you get out into an area that doesn't have cell phone reception, you can actually still take that route and load it into a Venza, and an Venza map, which is already there. Or you can load it up into Onyx, or you can load it up into Ride with GPS or another platform. But as long as that GPX file is residing on your phone and you downloaded it to that files folder, Now you have multiple apps you can open it up with, even though you don't have Wi-Fi connection, cell phone connection, nothing, and it works. And I've done this. That's my go-to strategy now. Is, I'll download it to my files folder. I'll then transfer it to my Wahoo device. And sometimes, I want to get a bigger look. I'll open it up in Avenza on my phone. I'll open up on Onyx on my phone, or even another app and take a look at it. That's one of my real fallbacks, is making sure I have that GPX file residing in that files folder.
I also want to reserve the right that I'm still learning as I go.
I think we all are.
Yeah.
Because that is not something I found. Is actually, this happened, I don't know, 18 months ago. Somebody's like, showed me, he's like, hey, I've downloaded this to my files folder. I'm like, okay, what are you talking about? And all of a sudden I started poking around and going, this is a really clean solution that really keeps you out of trouble.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for coming on. I'm glad we were able to take a deeper dive and looking into this and going into the pages. And, nobody walks into doing these routes just out of nowhere. I mean, we all really love the discovery and the history and how cycling through it brings it all together. And if we didn't really care about these things, I don't think we would be able to take our first step on it.
Yeah.
So,
well, Zach, thank you for having us back on your show. I think it's been the second, maybe the third time. And again, super, super love the work you do. And, I've got a lot of people that I ride with come to me and go, hey, do you know about this guy down in California? He does all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, I do know about him. And he does really good stuff. So it's really cool. Thank you.
Yeah. And why doesn't he hire a voice coach? Anyways, well, thanks for joining us. And, everyone if you're just joining right back, with this replay will be on YouTube. You can watch the whole thing, and we'll throw a few more links on once it posts. So thanks for joining us, Kevin, and we'll talk again soon.
Yeah. Thank you all. Thank you, Zach.
All right.